Good morning. Welcome to church today. I'm Xolani Kacela, the Interim Senior Minister here. We begin our days with our land acknowledgement, and we light our candle. Oops. Maybe it's covered up. I think. Is that better? How about in the back? Patrick, can you hear me? Patrick? Can't hear me? Okay. Can you adjust it one more time? Let me know when you can hear me. When Patrick can hear me. Barely? You can barely hear me. There you go. Okay. All right. Outstanding. We light our candle in honor of the Tommy and Mwekma Xolani indigenous people who were the first humans to inhabit our land thousands of years before colonial settlers arrived. We honor their resilience in the face of devastating harm, and we lift up their resilience and their neighbors to the south, the Amamutsan tribal band, with whom we are working to preserve their sacred land of Uristok and to ensure their culture and traditions continue. Amen.
We begin our service with the lighting of the chalice, the symbol of our faith. I invite you, those of you who are participating by Zoom, to light your chalices or the candle in your heart and to write into the chat where you are lighting. We light this chalice for the warmth of love, the light of truth, and the energy of service.
Well, February is a kind of complicated month for worship. There's so many things going on. We have Valentine's Day. Last week we had Super Bowl. Tomorrow is President's Day. So I thought I would kind of mix it up and take a little liberty with the free pulpit today and honor President's Day, but also another special occasion. Tomorrow is President's Day. So does anybody else know what that means for this weekend? No, sales. Daytona 500, which happens in Daytona, Florida. And I am a Daytona 500 fan. And it actually happens every Sunday of President's Day weekend. It's the one of two races that I watch every year. This year's been postponed because of rain, so it'll be happening tomorrow afternoon. But I never miss the Daytona 500. So in honor of the race, I'm going to exercise the free pulpit and mix together NASCAR and spirituality. Now, on this day in 2001, Dale Earnhardt Sr. died in the Daytona 500 in a crash. So I'd like to take one moment of silence to honor all those people who have died in this sport, which is an American favorite, especially in certain parts of the country. So a moment of silence. Well, the other day, someone told me that Californians are not into NASCAR. And he was right. I looked it up. And there's only one NASCAR track in California. It's in Sonoma. And there's only one race on the NASCAR circuit that's in California. And California ranks 48th of all the states with NASCAR fans. So you're lucky because I'm one of the several dozens that are among that group. Now, I admit I'm not the biggest NASCAR fan, and I'm sure some of you wonder, what is it like to watch those cars go around and around for hours? driving 500 miles, which is 200 laps on the NASCAR track. I imagine some people would say that's about as exciting as watching paint dry. But actually, it takes a lot of skill to drive a car 200 miles an hour for that length of time without crashing into other cars. And the coordination between the driver and the pit crew is amazing also. So it reminds me of the coordination that's needed to lead and run a congregation. We all have roles to play on Sundays. We have the musicians, the RE staff, the greeters, the tech team, the choir, and all of you who are here in the pews. And each week, we all have to come together to make this work. As the minister, I'm the driver, and hopefully not crashing and burning during the sermon. And the choir is the engine, adding power and passion to our service. And the people amongst us, you all who are sitting in the sanctuary, are energizing everything. Now, it may not be exactly a race as we think of a race, but it does take all of us to run the laps or our duties to make sure that we get to the finish line of a successful worship service. And just like at Daytona, there will be some wrecks and some messy pit stops along the way. We often have some tech glitches, but this morning we've had none. Well, we've had one already. But with each lap, we close in on the stained glass checkered flag every Sunday. So this morning, I say we call ourselves to worship in the name of going the distance, our shared values, and creating ministry like a fine-tuned spiritual pit crew. Amen. I invite us to rise in body and or spirit as we affirm our faith together, as we say our affirmation, which is printed on the bulletin or on the screen. Love is the doctrine of this church, and the quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek freedom, and to serve humankind in fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. This do we covenant with one another. El amor es la doctrina de esta iglesia. La búsqueda de la verdad es su sacramento. Y el servicio es su oración. Habitar juntos en paz, buscar la verdad con libertad y servir a la humanidad juntos, con el fin de que todas las almas pueden crecer en armonía con lo divino. Esto es lo que pactamos unos con otros. While you're risen, Diana's going to lead us as we sing hymn number 168, One More Step.
One
Good morning again. My name is Dena Dickinson. My pronouns are she, her. I'm the worship associate for today's service. Welcome to worship with the First Unitarian Church of San Jose, where we are seekers. Wherever you are in your faith or spiritual journey, you are welcome here. Our welcome is broad and inclusive. Here we cherish diversity among us, including gender, sexuality, race, ethnicity, and physical disability. This is a safe place to bring your whole self. Thank you for being here today. If you are new or visiting, thank you for becoming part of this community, whether it's just for today or for years to come. After the service, please join us in Hattie Porter Hall, which is through those double doors next door, where there is a newcomer table where you can find out more information about this church and our faith and enjoy a cup of coffee or tea and a treat. If you need a listening ear this week, please get in touch with our Pastoral Associate of the Week, Joyce Miller. The email to reach Pastoral Associates is on the chat and on the handout here in the sanctuary. Joyce will be at the pastoral care table during the social hour. We want you to know that you are not alone. Now we'll say hello to our friends joining us on Zoom. And the camera person will show the friends here in the room so the Zoomers can see our greetings to them. We want to thank the volunteers and staff who have made today's service possible. Announcements and fuller information is always in Nika's regular Wednesday email with the subject line, "This Week at FUCSJ." If you don't receive those emails and would like to, send a request to Nika at Nika, at sanjoseuu.org, asking to be added to the list. Her email will be put in the chat for those who are online. The nursery downstairs is open, and children from birth to kindergarten are welcome to spend the entire service there. Parents are welcome to accompany their children if they would like in the nursery. There's a monitor that streams the service, so you won't miss out. This month, we kicked off our annual giving campaign. A key part of that is the pledge parties, fun events that take place at members' houses or on Zoom. Please stop by the stewardship table in Hattie Porter Hall after the service to RSVP for a pledge party or to drop off your pledge form. Helping the church achieve its mission and in making love visible in all we see. I'm not ordering you around, Patrick. Get up here.
Yes. Hi, I'm going to make this quick. I know there's been a lot of questions about where the renovation project is going with the building, and we have been working with Garden City Construction to pick colors. You'll see some colors on the front of the wall. I think we're going to pull something together so everybody gets involved with that. The roofers already got us on the calendar for next year, and they're moving forward. We hope to have the final updated bid within 4 to 6 weeks. So please stay tuned. Things are moving forward. Thank you, Dena.
Hey. We like to hear those progress reports. So now it's time for all ages, and I would like to invite a crew of folks, Patty, Rivard, and team, to share the story with us.
Madeline, excuse me, Madeline, you are after, oh my gosh, after Rad. There's Rad. And there's Rad, okay. And then, okay, and I'm gonna stand next to you. Okay, so just, okay. Yes, please. Okay, today's story is The Day the Crayons Quit by Drew Daywalt and illustrated by Oliver Jeffries.
This material was removed from the video to respect copyright. This material was removed from the video to respect privacy.
Any others? Okay. Light a candle for all those spoken joys and those that remain in our hearts. I invite you for a moment of mindful meditation and prayer. Take a deep breath in and out. Center yourself. Find your center, comfortable in your body, in your mind, and your spirit. As I said earlier, February is a big month on the liturgical calendar, and tomorrow is President's Day. So in addition to those joys and sorrows that we heard and we read this morning, I want to lift up our nation's heritage of presidents. Spirit of life, on this President's Day Sunday, we gather with grateful hearts for leaders of this great nation, past and present. We know that heavy is the crown on their heads. We pray that they might lead with gentleness, integrity, and courage as they guide our country. We remember with fondness the wit and wisdom of presidents like Abraham Lincoln, who reminded us that tact is the ability to describe others as they see themselves. And we chuckle at George W. Bush's line, "It's really a budget, it's a whole numbers in it." May we appreciate the presidents who can laugh at themselves. We also recall President Obama's call for hope and unity. He said there is not a liberal America and conservative America, there is the United States of America. May we heed his words and see the common humanity that unites all of us. We know that our presidents are but human, flawed, and imperfect in many ways. But we recognize they have been called to carry heavy burdens on behalf of this nation. We ask mercy, grace, and guidance upon them. Where they are weak, may they find strength. Where uncertain, may they find confidence. When tired, rest. On this day, we pray for unity. Despite our differences, help us see the humanity in those with whom we disagree. Remind us behind every political party and ideology are people worthy of dignity and respect. And may we all, presidents, leaders, and citizens, commit to seek truth, justice, and equality for all people. May we be instruments of hope and progress in our neighborhoods, cities, and nation. Finally, one more request. A few more presidents with killer dance moves like Obama. For that, we ask this prayer in the prayers of our hearts. In the name of all that is noble, free, and for the preservation of democracy. Pray into the silence.
My pronouns are she, her, and I have been coming to this church for 27 and a half years, which coincidentally is also the amount of time I've been alive. So why I give to the church, why I started giving once I had my own income, is this place is my spiritual home. I have always considered it my spiritual home, even when I was living in Minneapolis or in Boston. I was very thankful I don't know if thankful is the right word, but in 2020, when everything with the pandemic hit, I was in Minneapolis. And I guess one bright side was that I was able to attend church again because it was on Zoom, and be more involved. And I think about sort of the future of the church and how giving other children the opportunity to grow up in an environment like this, like I was, and I would very much like that to continue. I have a lot of friends who talk about wanting their children to have a spiritual home, but not being willing to go back to the faith that they were raised in because of homophobia, transphobia, xenophobia, just in general. They want that spiritual home, but they don't feel that it aligns with their values anymore. And I never felt like I had to choose. Some people say, I was radicalized because of my church, meaning that their church was so, conservative that it made them realize that their values were more progressive. I say I was radicalized because of my church, but not in the way you would expect. Because growing up in this environment, really, I've always felt that it's very aligned with my values, even as I've grown up. And so I want other people to have that opportunity. I also recognize that trying out a new church, trying to find a new spiritual home is very, very hard. I want to acknowledge anyone who's here for the first time or is new to the church. That's really rough. Even when I was living in other places, I was always too anxious to go to services at the Unitarian churches there. So it's hard, and I feel like we should be able to give a welcoming, safe building for those that are looking for their new spiritual home, and be able to provide all the wonderful sort of resources for young families that my family took advantage of. Lastly, I still live with my parents. Financial pressures are definitely there, as I'm self-employed and I'm trying to figure out how to live independently in this area, but I still prioritize giving to the church because I've realized it's something my dad said very recently that really resonated with me. It was sort of like, I believe the world is a better place because the church exists. And I do really believe that. And even as I can be angry and frustrated and disappointed at things that are going on outside of the church, I always know that this is a place where I'll be welcomed and I'll find people who align with my values, who are working to make the world a better place. And so that is why I give to the church and prioritize giving to the church. I encourage you to prioritize giving to the church. Feel free to come to any of the pledge parties. There's one next Sunday at mine and my parents' house. We'll be doing an outdoor tea party if the weather holds up. So yeah, stewardship at sanjoseuu.org is where you can RSVP. And I thank you all for being here and thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Sophia. So the topic of conflict resolution. I have a long interest in conflict resolution activities and, more importantly, conflict prevention. Back in graduate school in 1982, I had a little flashback. This last week. I wrote a paper on accountability, developing a theoretical model on the importance of mutual transaction in establishing bilateral accountability. Sounds fancy, eh? It was fun to go back and read it this week, or last week, in preparation for this reflection. I was sitting there going, whoa, that's rather profound. Anyway, it was all about nursing, but it applies. Continuing on. If individuals are clear about the mutual accountability in relationships, there's a greater chance for conflict resolution and, more importantly, conflict prevention. In the late 1990s, I volunteered with a county victim offender mediation program. This program was for youth offenders meeting with adult victims of nonviolent misdemeanor type crimes, such as tagging, property damage. The program demonstrated the value of having facilitated discussion to move toward mutual understanding and hopefully resolution. The process included having both the victim and offender tell their story about how the crime affected the victim and the life circumstances of the offender. The power of personal story can lead to conflict resolution. Youth were able to hear and be heard, and to get to a place of apology and accountability. As a manager for 40 years, I built into my approach both conflict prevention and resolution. Key to both is realizing the common goals that we all come from and values that are the foundation of working together and being in community together in a workplace. I also thought it was important to give staff the authority to be accountable and to make decisions within existing policies and procedures, of course, and then live with their decisions and actions. I was recently told by some of the clinic staff that that approach helped them in their job satisfaction and career growth, as well as taking responsibility for the whole. This leads to conflict prevention, mutual accountability, common goals, and personal responsibility. And being a Unitarian Universalist since 1991 has grounded my beliefs and approach to conflict prevention and resolution in a spiritual foundation. The UU principles provide a pathway for living a value-based life and thereby work to prevent and resolve conflict. Our mission at First Unitarian Church is to make love visible in all we say and do. Love can guide the way. However, as Reverend Clovis Lewis said last week, love is sometimes hard. How do we find our way back to love when we are in a conflict with someone? I believe the proposed covenants provide a foundation for both conflict prevention and conflict resolution. The congregational and behavioral covenants, quote, help us bring our best selves to the community and increase awareness of actions to nurture and support that community. I admit that when I first read them, my reaction was, whoa, that's a lot of expectations. But I was able to change my thinking about them and now believe that they are created in love and will guide our path to living our UU principles and values. I invite you to embrace them in that light. And I just happen to have a copy of the covenants that someday will be voted on, if anybody wants to see them afterward. And they are on the website. I am now going to provide 2 readings from the book Transforming Conflict, The Blessings of Congregation Turmoil by Teresa Cooley. William Ury's excellent book, The Power of a Positive No, offers us a very interesting twist on uncovering our values. Ury focuses on our discomfort in saying no. Our culture often trains us to believe that no has the potential to divide and escalate conflict. Women seem to respond, Yes, women seem to internalize this message much more intently than men. No seems to be the 2-year-old response to anything, and we all know how far that gets a 2-year-old. But if we're going to learn how to uphold boundaries and set limits on what we can and can't do, we cannot avoid it. Ury flips the question and asks us to think first about what are we saying yes to? Rather than starting with the no that can alienate, it helps to be clear about what you do value. I teach this method to my staff all the time. In the face of a demanding congregant, not that there's ever anyone here, footnote, it can be far more effective to say, I really want to do the best job I can do on the newsletter, so I just can't get to your question right now, than to just say, no, I won't do that. Just as we've come to realize it can be hard to surface those values, just as we've come to realize, it can be hard to surface those values that undergird our decisions. Ury offers us a practice that can take us through the process. Often the biggest challenge we encounter by understanding ourselves better is that we just don't take the time to do it. Pressures of work and family and who knows what can get in our way, but creating space and time to engage in some of these practices actually helps us alleviate some of the pressure. Creating a space to stand alone, to learn to understand ourselves, actually allows us to be with others in compassion and acceptance. And second, from the book, The Creative Encounter, an interpretation of religion and the social witness by Howard Thurman. In our personal values, particularly at the point of personal choices, the question which we ask when confronted with the decision is apt to be not what do I really and truly want to do, or what is the right thing to do, but rather what bearing will my action, whatever it is, have on my relationship to those upon whose approval I depend for my own rating, my own self-estimate. In other words, will my action cut the tie that binds me securely to those whose life sustains my own emotionally? Conflict arises whenever the individual is faced by a challenge to do that which is out of line with what he conceives to be his duty to the group that sustains him. When he violates the command of the group, he is disturbed because his sense of values has been thrown out of balance.
Let's show some love for Bev Clifford. John Ector, and the Allegria Singers. Well, today we're talking about conflict. I was thinking maybe I might need to give some context for this service. We were going to have a team here today for this service because we've been working behind the scenes for the last year, bringing together a special team around conflict. And the team couldn't be together today, so we're going to do it next month. But this is one of these topics that a lot of congregations struggle with, is conflict. So I titled this The Rocky Road of Conflict Resolution. And this sermon really could have a subtitle. I just watched the movie American Fiction. If any of you all have seen that, it's a fantastic movie about a guy who's a writer and a professor who writes a lot of books that don't get a lot of publicity. So he decides to take on a new persona to meet the general public's idea of what is good, and then he becomes a bestseller. Well, the story I'm going to tell has some resonance with that for me, and I'm thinking the subtitle of this sermon could be My UU Fiction. About 3 weeks ago, I got a wake-up call following an interview with the search committee. This really shook me up because I was thrown off by a question they asked me. And it reminded me of Howard Thurman's quote about what an individual's duty is to a group that they belong to, and how does that affect their relationship to the group. And in this case, it really caused me a bit of inner conflict, primarily inside, which I have shared with some colleagues to help me work through. Now, in this case, I could have done what Teresa Cooley said in her reading, just simply say no to the question. But I decided to take it on. I wanted to kind of figure out what is the right thing to do in this circumstance and kind of go for the high road. I was trying to think of what is the right thing to do and balance that with what will impact this relationship with this search committee, this group of people who I'm trying to make a great impression upon. And it really kind of got to me. The question they asked me was, why do you want to be a minister to a mostly white congregation? Well, it was obvious to me that this committee didn't realize that all UU congregations are mostly white, right? If I was going to be a minister of a congregation that is not mostly white, I wouldn't be a UU minister because there are none. That type of question really kind of, what we used to say, hems in a person of color in the UU context. It just gives you this sense of being limited about who you are and what your response can be. And I wanted to be as authentic as I could with them, but I still felt this conflict. What I realized in the aftermath is that those people, that congregation or that search committee, really had no deep understanding of UU history, either distant or recent. Because our history is filled with people in conflict over differences in theology and in belief. If you go back to the 1800s, you'll get a real clear sense of what I'm talking about. So I want to explore both of these, our distant history and our more recent history. The Unitarian minister, Theodore Parker, was known for stirring up congregational conflict. I see Joyce over there shaking her head, smiling about this. He preached in the 19th century. He was born in 1810 and died in 1860. And he famously defined true Christianity as rooted in the essence of Jesus' moral teachings. He emphasized intuition and transcendence as the vital aspects of religious and spiritual experience. His famous sermon, Discourse on the Transient and Permanent in Christianity, was one that really got him a name for himself. He preached it over 25 times throughout New England, trying to work out his theology and his belief system about what true Unitarianism really meant in that day. And he received a lot of backlash for it. In fact, the Unitarian Association eventually stripped him of his Unitarian ministerial credentials because of his strong stance on the nature of religion being based in intuition and transcendence. And he had strong views on abolition. He wasn't afraid to stand up for his convictions and challenge the status quo. I think Parker could have used a conflict resolution team. But the question he posed was important. The question that they posed to me made me feel like I was unseen and reduced my ministry to a matter of skin color. Despite my efforts to present a comprehensive view of my ministerial work, the question seemed to be fixed on this single point of view. And just like that, I felt woke once more. Now, what if they had asked LGBTQ ministers why do they want to preach to straight congregations? Or what if they'd asked women ministers why do they want to preach to men? Or perhaps would they ask a young minister why do they want to preach to older congregations? Church conflict arises when these issues present themselves and they're viewed in simple terms rather than with nuance and complexity. The Reverend Teresa Cooley, who's a dear friend of mine, says we best deal with conflict by asking ourselves, what values support our decisions? By understanding our values, we get to know ourselves as individuals. And that requires slowing down and taking time to know ourselves. The question they posed to me during the interview served as a wake-up call, shaking me from this pleasant dream I'm having here at San Jose, being your minister. Despite working with incredible individuals here in San Jose at First Unitarian, I realized I am still called to stand on my values and convictions and use a dose of Theodore Parker. The leaders here, along with many others, have a talent for slowing us down. And they understand who we are as Unitarian Universalists, who are engaged in shared ministry. And I feel recognized and heard and understood when I'm working with them. Now, our recent Unitarian Universalist history has been devoted to dismantling the structures which disrupt our ability to be based in intuition and to live freely. Intuition, I believe, is an overlooked human quality. It allows us to feel interconnected and helps us move beyond our heads and to get into our bodies and to connect with the universe. Who remembers the slogan, "Get in the zone"? Let's try that. Get in the zone. Get in the zone. It's supposed to be AutoZone. Don't remember that. Well, intuition is another type of zone. It's the zone of creativity, compassion, justice, and it's also where we find the skills to deal with conflict resolution. Another word for it is flow. Now, people who sport fish describe the water that is not moving as slack. And when I dealt with that question, I felt a sense of slackness or stagnancy within me. When water is slack, nothing happens. But if you wait long enough, the tide rises and the current returns and the flow resumes. People who understand nature understand the nature of flow. It comes and it goes. In relationships, we love flow. but we struggle when things become slack or when there's some stagnancy in our relationships. So it's important to give ourselves and our partners slack, that is, time and space for things to settle. And understanding the tide and how things come back with the tide can help us understand that our partners and our lovers and our spouses will come back to us again. This time last week, my wife and I were in Paris, the great city of Paris, not Paris, Texas, which is 100 miles east of Dallas. But we were there in the great city of Paris in France. And to prepare for that trip, I listened to this podcast called The Eiffel Tower, a play on the Eiffel Tower. The podcast is hosted by a guy named Oliver G. And in one of his podcast episodes, he spoke to a guide who was a fisherman on the Seine River that runs right through Paris. He told this great story about the River Seine. He said that during the pandemic, when the planes weren't flying overhead and cars weren't driving through the city and boats and vessels weren't streaming down the river became crystal clear. He said they could see the bottom of the river, and they could also see the fish swimming in the river. It didn't help them catch more fish, but they could see all the fish that were swimming around. Well, when I was there, I took the opportunity to go on a little fishing adventure. We got up one morning very early and went down and fished right in front of Notre Dame Cathedral. The water by now is very brown. I call it kind of ashy looking, but still shimmery and full of a lot of current. And of course, I caught no fish. But I was there and I was able to immerse myself and bask in the beauty of the city and the glory of the Notre Dame Cathedral, even though it's under renovation. But the question remains, why do I, as a Black person, want to be a minister of a mostly white congregation? Why does anyone want to be a member of any congregation? What is the purpose of congregational life? Well, we heard from Sophia that the church makes the world a better place. In Theodore Parker's day, belonging to a church helped people deal with a three-letter word, S-I-N, sin. In our day, belonging to a church helps us deal with another word, three-letter word, E-G-O, ego. And the concepts of sin may appear different, but they both point to a similar thing, the human tendency to put ourselves, our wants, and our desires at the center of everything that goes on around us. Being a part of a spiritual community challenges this mindset. We, as church members, encourage one another to prioritize the collective we ahead of the individual me. So let's say that together. We put the we ahead of the me. Well, last week we celebrated Valentine's Day, the day where we set aside our egos and we celebrate the love we share with other people. And for those in relationships, marriages or partnerships, it's a reminder that the world doesn't revolve around the individual me. But during the pandemic and during this trip last week, my wife and I spent a lot of time together. And as Oliver G's fishing guide told us, we got a chance to see each other much more than we ever imagined possible. And it forced us to be really present with each other. We were in each other's space, and we were in each other's face a lot. Well, my wife says that I have a tendency to always want to be right. And I wonder, by a show of hands, does anybody else hear this lament from their partner? Let's do a little bit higher so I can see the hands. Okay. Okay. That makes me not feel like I'm the only one. In essence, what she is saying to me is that I have a me problem. And she's not entirely wrong. And I appreciate her honesty, even though it's often hard to hear. And for those of us who raised our hands, and I'm getting the impression that those of you who didn't raise your hand, you don't have this issue. Am I tracking that right? Not necessarily, Don. Okay, all right. Dinah's being honest. I appreciate that. For those of us who are in relationships and have partners or we have friends, we all can work on the we part of our relationship together. Her words remind me that I need to see her as a source of joy and companionship, not as a person who fits into some arbitrary category that I have conceived in my mind. It's more important for me to recognize the shared history that she and I have together, which makes us and helps me focus on the we. Well, how can we see each other more clearly in this community? This is a question that we've been grappling with when we talk about navigating conflicts. How can we truly see each other and understand each other without bringing to bear upon each other external expectations? So to address this question, we have established a new team within the church. It's called the Right Relations Team. And the team members are Hattie Rivard, who led the Time for All Ages, Robin Beresford, and John Hurd. I'm wondering, is it possible that we can spotlight John and Robin on the Zoom screen because they're here in the Zoom space? If you can't, we can do it as we go on in the service. This team will assist members who need help resolving conflicts, but they're really about improving communication. That's what they want us to emphasize to you, is that they're here to help people develop communication skills. When you find yourself in conflict with a person within this community, the RRT is going to be there for you. It's taken us over a year to get this team established, and we did it with the help of the senior leaders, with Ram and MM and Jan, and the transitions team, who consists of Meredy Ender, Liz Bowen, and Deb Fenzel-Alexander. And we've had our times of going back and forth. We've had some flow and we've had some slack in getting this team up together. But we're going to have a service next month where we really bring them to bear on the congregation, and we'll allow you to meet them personally. It may be a wake-up call for some people that conflict actually exists in this community. It ebbs and it flows. There's current and there's slack. But the RRT wants you to discover that there is shared purpose within our community. And you'll be able to reach out to them when you find yourself on the rocky road to conflict and need somebody to help you pave the way. As Reverend Cooley writes, creating space for self-understanding allows us to approach others with compassion and acceptance. But that question still remains. And I believe all search committees can bear to heed the words of the great intuitive creator and composer Quincy Jones. Growing up in Chicago, Illinois, without his mother, who had been committed to a mental health institution when he was 11 years old, Quincy Jones started to understand his mother's absence and how its absence, or her absence, at one point, I stopped thinking about myself, the me, and more about her, and thinking about the things that she had gone through and how much she loved us, the we. And I got it. It was late, but I got it. He continues, you got to let go of all the past and bring the good parts forward. Forget about the negative stuff and go on, because whenever you get hung up and locked into the past, you're robbing yourself of the present and definitely the future. Quincy Jones, one of 19 EGOTs in the world, understands the importance of intuition and essence. EGOTs dedicate themselves to bringing beauty into the world and putting their artistry above their ego. An EGOT, as many of you know, is a person who has won an Emmy, a Grammy, an Oscar, and a Tony. And there are only 19 such people in the world. Perhaps the key to conflict resolution is creating beauty. Letting go of ego leads to less conflict and more love on this Valentine's Day Sunday. I've decided to let go of that question, which represents the past. I've got to bring the good stuff forward. And as Dena encouraged, I've changed my thinking, and I want to do the thing that she so gracefully modeled. Can we save ourselves from ourselves? I don't know. We need something bigger than ourselves to save us. In Unitarian Universalism, we call that the spirit of love. Another search committee understood this all too well. They didn't ask me the black-white question. Instead, they said, let us tell you why we are the community that you need to serve. That is the type of wake-up call. Marnie's shaking her head. That's the kind of wake-up call every minister dreams of hearing. And I wish the blessings the same on this search committee here. And I'm grateful and honored that you have entertained me, and I hope that you have a successful search. Bless you all. Bless you all. I love you. Thank you. Amen.
The offering today will be for the UU Society for Community Ministries, and Colleen will tell us about that. And you all, if you don't know, I was going to say, you all know how to give money. If anybody doesn't, we'll tell you later. We're running out of time.
You know, I'm not going to read everything here, so don't get freaked. My name's Colleen, and I facilitate the special donations for our church. I'm getting feedback somehow. The special donation for the month of February is the UU Society for Community Ministries. And Joy Ellen Lipsky, who is a community minister and has been for years, gave me this description. Community ministry has been around for centuries and called by many names: community-based ministry, specialized ministry, public ministry, social ministry, ministers at large, and the larger ministry. From the first days of Unitarian Universalist history in America, our congregations have been involved in care for the wider community. Our histories must continue to research the roles that our early community ministers played in the anti-slavery movement, women's rights, and much more. Modern commissioned community ministers are laity or clergy who are in a formal relationship with a Unitarian Universalist congregation, continuing our legacy of prophetic work beyond the walls of the church. This special collection helps the UU Society for Community Ministries to support its members directly and remain in dialogue with the UUA and the UU Ministers Association to further the reach of community ministers. As I said earlier, Joy Ellen Lipsky serves through our church, and Tara Collier-Young is in SoCal nearby. Thank you. Please give generously.
Our closing hymn this morning, now this afternoon, is number 1030 in the Teal hymnal, Siahamba, We Are Marching. So for our graduation today, we're all going to sing in Zulu. Yes, we are. We're going to sing in Zulu 2 times through as written. You'll pick it up on the fly. Have fun. All right, this is a marching song, but let's have fun. Here we go. Siahame kuhanyen kwen klos. Siahame kuhanyen kwen klos. Siahame kuhanyen kwen klos. Siahame kuhanyen kwen klos. Siahama. You all graduated.
Well, I mentioned the Theodore Parker as the Unitarian minister from the 19th century, and you may know him more than you think you do. He wrote a famous quote in one of his sermons in 1858, where he said, "I do not pretend to understand the moral universe. The arc is a long one. My eye reaches but little ways. I cannot calculate the curve and complete the figure by the experience of sight. I can divine it by conscience, and from what I see, I am sure it bends towards justice." And you heard that paraphrased by Obama and several other famous people in recent times. Our closing words are from another UU minister, found in our gray hymnal, number 705. It says, "If we agree in love, there is no disagreement that can do us any injury. But if we do not, no other agreement can do us any good. Let us endeavor to keep the unity of the Spirit and the bonds of peace." Jose Balou. Keep your heads up and your hearts open, my friends. You may go in peace. Amen.